Let me start this entire affair by stating the following fact. Fanboys are, for lack of a better term, fucking idiots. Now that part's out of the way, there's these two games. These two games both released on the most recent console generation. Both borrowed cinematic tropes from the movies. Both launched within the first year or so of that whole exclusive hype window, and both have hordes of fanboys defending them like console manufacturers actually owe fanboys something. These two games, of course, are Ryse, Son of Rome on Xbox One, and The Order 1886 for PlayStation 4. The rules here are simple. An objective look at both titles, weighing their strengths and weaknesses against each other to see which one is, by my personal standards, the better game. So, comment section, come the fuck at me, bro. I'm ready for you. Come on, bring it on. Bring it on. So, without further ado, let's start and play The Order 1886, or as it's otherwise known, take some Victorian shit, slap some gears on it and call it steampunk. Our first title follows the exploits of the Order through the eyes of our main character Grayson, or as he's also called, Sir Galahad. See, this game is set around the fictional exploits of the Knights of the Round Table, a fact which it doesn't really explain for a good hour or so, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's focus on the first thing that the player is presented with in the game, the visual style borrowed straight from an American blockbuster. Yeah, an American blockbuster set in London. Can't lie, my hopes are not particularly high right now. Now, before I critique anything else, I do have to address my biggest gripe with this game. Black fucking bars! Dear game developers, let me stress something to you. Let me put it out in black and white. Games are not films, and by that logic, films are not games. Using a cinematic approach or set piece is one thing, but when you use bullshit like this to cover up your ineptitude, and cover up your grey areas and your corners, you come off looking like a pretentious douchebag. Seriously, there is no fucking reason for this game to play out in a letterbox form from a technical standpoint. The only reason it does is that it's a cheap way to upscale the game to 1080p, something that Sony requires from all exclusive games on the PlayStation 4. In reality, the game runs around 800p, then sacrifices screen real estate by slapping on this bullshit. Seriously, all they're doing is increasing the frame resolution by adding a single pixel at the far edges at the top and bottom of the screen. The only thing being rendered is the game in the middle of this crap. And I've heard the "it's running at 21.9, not 16.9" argument, and I don't buy it. That makes even less sense than it was done for aesthetic. But then again, we're dealing with a developer who at one point had this title running at a locked 24 frames per second and decided to put it to 30 because 24 didn't feel good. I'm willing to bet these are the same guys who keep saying that 30 is more cinematic. Okay, and now the ranting segment of this review is over, let's actually play the game. Whew. Okay, so like I mentioned, the game follows the Victorian exploits of the Order, an ancient society of knights and scholars who fight for... Oh, actually, the game does a pretty shitty job of explaining what they fight for. The best understanding of the plot is understanding that the Order is dedicated to killing anything that isn't human, and maintaining the authoritative control of the British government and the United India Company, a thinly veiled metaphor for the real-world East India Trading Company. Through the game's 6.5 hour length, we shoot our way through an inconsistent cast of villains, including asylum inmates, rebels against the Empire, officers of the law, werewolf-esque lichens, and randomly at the halfway point, fucking vampires. Though it mostly ends up being the human portion of the cast. As I mentioned, the action follows the order of Her Royal Majesty's Knights, and that is the main selling point here. And sadly, it does a pretty bad job of explaining itself. Effectively, Grayson, by way of his mentor Sir Percival, uncovers a conspiracy that goes all the way to the head of the Knights. I won't spoil it too much because the game is short enough and now cheap enough for any PlayStation 4 owner to pick up, but just be prepared for a lot of inconsistent plot elements to be thrown at you with little to no substance to back them up, and all thrown at you very, very quickly. It's effectively a bad Zack Snyder script in terms of how much it expects you to know about the lore, while doing a bad job of conveying the plot points or character development, even if, sadly, the voice and the motion capture used is very, very, very well performed and very, very good. Sadly though, this would be the saving grace of gameplay that holds it all together, but it's kinda lacking.
Understand that the gunplay, for the most part, feels pretty good. Rifles and pistols are rather smooth. It reminds me of the Uncharted games, and that's not a bad thing. The problems arise when you get out of this comfort zone and you start using the Tesla-powered weapons or the thermite rifle. Then it gets a little wonky. It's very clear the art department had a lot of influence, and the problem was the people in charge of making it work in the game didn't have as much influence as they should have had. It needs to go back to the drawing board on the gameplay side of things to be tinkered with and fine-tuned to make it work properly.
I don't know. I have played a lot worse than this, but I've definitely played a lot better. I should probably mention the game's performance, and yes, visually it is quite good. It's not the best looking thing out there, despite what, certain fanboys will claim, but it's still bloody nice to look at. And I only ever had one moment of frame rate shrug near the finale of the game, and when it happened, it caught me totally off guard. Seriously, it was so out of the blue and shocking to me that I yelled rather loudly, to the point that I woke up my wife sleeping across the room and got a very good telling off.
Thanks for that, game. Thank you.
Oh, right, yeah. One last thing, the quick time events. They're everywhere. Some of them are whatever, but the entirety of the midpoint and final bosses, which by the way are the same fight, rely entirely on quick time events for completion. I've never really had an issue with QTUs, but in this game they're kind of obnoxious. Not like David Cage obnoxious, but rather kind of awkward. Alas, we have a second game, so let's crack on with it.
Up next, from the Mountain Dew sponsored X-Bro camp, we have Ryse, Son of Rome.
So, unlike the shoot-'em-up gameplay of The Order, Ryse is an action hack-and-slash game based on the life and times of Marius Titus, set loosely in ancient Rome during the reign of Emperor Nero and the conquest of Britannia. And the first thing, first fucking things, people! Holy shit, there's no black bars! Yes! What is this? Is that microtransactions? Fucking what?!
Do I even have to explain why this is a bad thing? Like, imagine spending $450 on a brand new launch day Xbox One, then popping $60 down on your brand new copy of Ryse, Son of Rome, and then being asked to pay extra money. You've already been bled for $510 plus tax, and now they're demanding more from you? How consumer unfriendly is that?
And the worst part? The game at hand isn't even that bad, at least in terms of combat, story, actor performance, and visuals. The combat flows very nicely, with a system based around the Roman soldier standard issue sword and shield combination. You can smash, parry, stab, and roll your way through gaggles of barbarians in various backgrounds. It feels very satisfying to play. The attacks have good weight to them, and the glory kill system, while rooted in quick time events, is at least an end to a series of attack and not in the middle of a fucking cutscene. Plus they're pretty quick, so they don't feel like they're breaking up the flow too much. I mean, there's better ways to do it in games like this, but this time it doesn't bug me.
So I did mention that this game has some very loose ties to actual historical events and figures. And by very loose, I mean that the history nerds in the audience are about to get really fucking triggered.
The game focuses on Nero's conquest of ancient Britain, through the eyes of the grieving Marius, shortly after losing his father and family in an apparent invasion by said Britons in Rome. Marius, fueled by revenge, rapidly becomes a centurion and unleashes fury in the invasion of Dover and the people of Boudica. The plotline follows a pretty basic thread from here, with a couple of plot twists that are pretty telegraphed. Overall, it's based heavily and not very subtly on the legend and mythos of Damocles, and by subtly I mean that we literally take on the persona of the legendary warrior for a bit. Admittedly though, these scenes are really cool and play out rather spectacularly.
That's the thing with this game. Whereas the Order tried the whole cinematic angle through presentation, this one tries to do it through set pieces with ridiculous backdrops or sweeping shots. Sometimes, such as the Cliffs of Dover scene, it works. Other times, it's a little bit cheesy.
That's a pretty good way of evaluating the game overall. A mixed bag. Visually, like The Order, it's nice. Like The Order, it has some pretty good performances from the cast. But unlike The Order, it has constant frame rate issues. It's nearly always below 30. And in the final showdown with Boudica, the game chugged like a frat boy at a party. Also, the use of Kinect commands are rather dumb. I don't own a Kinect for XB1, and honestly, games like this that tacked it on at launch are kind of the reason why I don't want one. It's beyond a gimmick to be able to yell a volley command instead of holding down the left bumper. Alas, it is satisfying to lead your men as a Centurion, and the torturous formation segments are a lot of fun. I just wish the game didn't have these glaring issues, and that the boss fights were more varied. Well, barring the fight next to a giant wicker man with the Scottish barbarian King Glot, that fight is a ton of fun, just because it reminded me of Dark Souls with all the roll dodging. Also, did I mention I beat this title in 5.5 hours? I feel like that's an important thing to add here.
Now it's decision time. Which one of these do I feel won today's challenge? You know what? They're both kind of crap. Like, I'll openly admit I generally prefer hack and slash games, so I got a lot of fun out of playing Ryse, but the microtransactions and the performance issues just bog the whole thing down. So, you know what? No winner. They both win another award for wasted potential. And to the people who still defend these games, the people who make the hardware you so clamorously defend don't owe you a fucking thing. Okay, let's get this very, very clear. Do you know what you guys sound like when you put crap on a pedestal like this? You really want to know? You sound like Zack Snyder. Start and play The Order 1886, or as it's otherwise known, take some Victorian shit, slap some gears on it and call it steampunk. It's the octopus joke in 3, 2, 1, you're on.
It's even wearing a monocle and a tiny top hat. But where did it find all those gears? The world may never know.
I miss Regretzy.
I do too.
What?
April Winchell, come back to us, or at least give us a fucking archive! I'm tired of seeing your frickin' page!
April!
I have IMDb for that shit now! I want Regretzy back! I don't care if it's no new content!
Do you know how much cringy shit I find on Etsy in a day?
Look at this! Even my little kitty hype man is pissed off!
April, come back to us!
April!
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 April! Damn, even the feline. Alright, cut!